All right, grand finale.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, of course. So OpenTable has been around for 20 years, which almost sounds crazy to say in the world of restaurant technology. Needless to say, the company has seen a lot of change. Things have come and gone, trends have come and gone. Technology has arrived, I would say. What are some of the recent product changes and developments that you're excited about at OpenTable?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it has really invented the industry that it now operates in terms of online restaurant reservations. On the diner side, some of the interesting trends that we've been really pushing toward are a couple of things. One is, this near me now phenomenon. One of the statistics we've seen is that 25% of our bookings on the app were happening within 90 minutes of seat time. That's not a reservation anymore. That's the homing beacon for what's available and around me right here, right now. We know, for example, in a place like Manhattan, people are not willing to travel more than 10 blocks from where they are. So
10 blocks? Is that like?
Yeah, the denser the geography, the less people are willing to travel. So, the polygon that we would draw around your space and make a set of restaurant recommendations. All of that is in a goal to really become the ultimate restaurant recommendation engine. We look at all of our data and say, how do we get the right diner in the right restaurant at the right time? On the restaurant side, we've been chock-a-block with innovation. I think the stuff that I'm most interested in, first of all, is just the amount of data that we're putting in a restaurateur's hands. I think JJ, who was speaking here earlier, was referencing the percentage of his diners that were local versus travelers, and he showed me on his OpenTable GM app in the green room, hey, look, this is where I got that data and information. And
he really did do that.
She witnessed it. And what's great about that is because we're in the cloud now, the data and information has been pushed out, and now we can do a whole lot more things. So we can make a restaurateur more, smarter than they ever were before. So then they can make better changes and more operational changes in their restaurant as a result of the information that we're supplying to them. So this is all about putting that at the forefront. And then we're also doing a lot of great stuff with groups and, recognizing that oftentimes it's not just a singular restaurant, which is how OpenTable historically often tried to deal with these restaurants, but recognize this is part of a group. And so if I dine at one of your restaurants, how do I make sure that you feel like a regular at another one of those restaurants? And so really trying to complete the picture, but behind that is a deep data story.
Cool. You now have a dedicated data science team, which is a very buzzy term in the industry, but can you tell us a little bit more about what they're working on?
The cool thing, first of all, data science, it is a buzzy term, as is artificial intelligence and machine learning and all of these other things that go around it. But the truth of the matter is, as any data scientist will tell you, that 80% of the work is getting, organizing, and cleaning, and really making ready the data. And the thing that I think is most unique and most special about OpenTable is the unique data that we have. So if you think about the top of funnel players that are very, very, very large out there in the universe, what they don't have is, which butt sat in which seat. We have the understanding of where the intersection of where a diner and a restaurant comes together. So it's an incredibly rich and unique data set that I think is, a big, big chunk of why we can actually then apply things like, our neural networks on, machine learning algorithms, which if you asked me 4 more questions, I probably wouldn't be able to answer them. But the point of the matter is what it enables in real life is that I put better restaurant recommendations in front of each of you. So you're going to have, if we take all 47,000 of our restaurants, you're going to have a different list and ranking than someone else is going to have. And the importance of personalization for your experience, because ultimately, our business is in the business of connection. And if we don't connect a diner to a restaurant, we really don't make money. And so we've got to be really smart about how we make those connections.
Mm-hmm. I think when we talked before, you said connecting data to the real world, which I really like. I think making sense of actual hard data that you have. Also, when we spoke in San Francisco ahead of this, you told a story from one of your restaurant partners. I think she was in Indianapolis, about the dishwasher. Do you remember which one?
Yeah.
Can you retell that story, because it's just so wonderful?
Martha Hoover from Pâte Choux, and she's amazing. I got to meet her at the Fab conference earlier this year, but it was talking about, well, first of all, a lot of it was talking about how we treat our employees in the restaurant industry, and how, if you think about the opportunity when you treat the people in your restaurant with a certain amount of respect, but also that the data and information can come from a lot of different places. And that was borne out by, a simple thing where she pays her dishwasher way more than the minimum wage. And she's like, but the value that comes from this dishwasher is extraordinary. I know in a 5-minute conversation that the soup sucks just by having a conversation with the dishwasher, because he's dumping it out over and over and over again. And it's those connections and those, putting those together, but it also speaks to the kind of leader she is, because she's having that conversation with people in her organization. And that dishwasher has stayed with her for 22 years. And the reason for which he's staying with her is because he feels like he's valued and he has, an opinion that she's going to use and then redeploy in the restaurant.
I love that story. I've used that a couple of times because I think it's so fascinating. But I'm curious. So how can technology, like OpenTable's technology or just restaurant technology generally, support those kinds of relationships while still innovating on a technical level?
Yeah, technology is everything that we do. Having been around for 20 years, that technology has morphed and changed, as you pointed out. But, we look at providing value along 3 main pillars: marketing, operations, and hospitality. And technology is a driver of all of those. On the marketing side, it's how well am I getting diners to come to OpenTable? Then I can put diners inside of your restaurant. On the operations side, it's being smarter around, okay, as a restaurateur, you're trying to maximize the throughput in your restaurant. And if we can, through better analysis of, hey, your 2 tops are turning at, 49 minutes instead of the hour and a half that you have set for them, you can actually get more in. So putting it in a position where we're going to maximize that throughput. And then on the hospitality side, it's really about creating those special moments. So to the extent that we can demonstrate that someone's a wine lover, making sure that the som is getting over to the table as quickly as possible. All of those, though, hopefully the guest doesn't necessarily see them happening in real time. What they see and experience is the warmth and energy and the joy that you're creating in your space. And that's the kind of environment we're trying to create.
Great. I want to talk about OpenTable's marketing efforts. So 4 years ago, OpenTable was acquired by the Priceline Group, now Booking Holdings. You've been with the company since 2015, so post-acquisition. How has working under the larger umbrella of that group changed, I guess, operations and specifically marketing strategy? Because I personally, from following the company, have noticed a bit of a shift. So I'm curious, how you've seen it change and evolve, and what the benefits are to be working with such a large company.
I think one of the first benefits is, OpenTable is no longer a standalone public company, and so not necessarily pressured to, that quarterly drumbeat of hit that number, which then, and look, Booking Holdings very much has a very much a results orientation, but the reality is you could invest in a longer time period. You could say, look, there's something that, we really want to move toward, and it's going to take 12 months to get there, and so you have the ability to invest over longer time frames. The other most important thing is the travel aspect of it. Obviously, this is Skift, so we should talk about it. But the best users on OpenTable are travelers. So if you've experienced OpenTable in 2 cities or more, you have the highest frequency of any user group in our entire network. So our most valuable users on OpenTable are travelers. And so the idea of how do we put these things together, the other, this is a huge revelation, but 100% of travelers need to eat. And so, how do we, get back to that ultimate restaurant recommendation when we know that you're not at home? And, I literally, landed in New York this afternoon, skidding in, how do I get that recommendation? I don't, I do know New York, but if I land in a city that perhaps I don't know as well, how do I get a recommendation for something? How do I know? And it may not be the 3 Michelin star restaurant, but it may just be like, how do I get that great local haunt? We've got to be in a better position to provide great recommendations to travelers, and we know that those are our best customers here at OpenTable.
So recommendations are already personalized, correct? So I see personalized.
But we can get way better than we are today.
So when is that going to happen?
I think it's an iterative process. I mean, I think, again, we talk about artificial intelligence, and we always joke. There's a woman who works at OpenTable. Her name is Francesca, and I was like, that is artificial intelligence. If we could bottle her and put that into the market, and she knows who I am, she knows what I like, she knows what I don't like, she knows where I live, we're not there yet, where somebody really understands deeply who you are and can make that personalized recommendation. But it's a march toward that, and even in that situation, even if she knows who I am, I have to tell her what kind of mood I'm in. The beauty of dining is that you sometimes you're in a Thai mood or a fried chicken mood or a pasta mood, and nobody can get that out of you unless we're actually inside your brain somehow.
Right.
I'm not recommending that.
Not there yet. Okay, cool. So I'm curious if people actually want that. That personalized recommendation, or how far to go, because I think now in like a personalized world and everything's moving towards personalization, or perhaps we've gone too far. Like serendipity now seems exciting, right? So how do you, as a company who knows a ton about me, give me what I want, but also like without knowing that you're.
Well, I think part of what's in there is this interesting trend around discovery and transaction starting to collapse on each other. So the discovery players are trying to move into transactions, and the transaction players are trying to move up into the discovery layer. The good news is I think being in the transaction business is relatively challenging, and the plumbing associated there is relatively hard. So we are very much trying to move into that discovery layer. But what we're trying to do is we recognize that giving you a list of 7,000 restaurants is not useful. And that sometimes we have to make sure that the list that we give you is the right list. But the other thing is, how do we supply our own list? So we spent the summer, we launched a bunch of new lists that contain both sort of an editorial component, but also a data-driven component. We took markets like Chicago, where we said, okay, and I called it a heuristic algorithm, and you're like, what the hell does that mean? But but essentially what we mean by it is we'll say, okay, here's 3 great restaurants in Chicago. How many of our diners ate at all 3 of them? Interesting. We have a sample now of 7,000 diners. Where else did they go to eat? Now we have a sort of a sense that these are tastemakers. And so then that became a basis for how we could generate lists and get back at that moment of serendipity, and then create moments where you say, okay, I'm in the mood for this kind of experience. I'm going to go to OpenTable for those lists.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. As such, as travel is so important, how important is international expansion for you? Because I know you've had a number of big announcements recently.
Yeah, I mean, I think our ambition is to create the global dining passport, so that you could open up your app in any city around the world and experience recommendations for where you should go out to eat. Today, we're meaningfully in about 20 markets. We've been in places like the UK for a very long time. We have about 8,000 restaurants there, and we've launched in markets like the Netherlands and Spain, and have kind of come back at it and trying to figure out what is the right way to continue to expand globally. The thing about OpenTable is that it's a 2-sided marketplace, so you need both restaurants and diners. And every new market that you go into, you need restaurants and diners. And the diner part is more challenging because you have to actually get the demand flywheel spinning again. The good news is I can take global travelers and put them into a market. So, we saw, for example, in Barcelona, a big pop after Mobile World Congress, because you had a bunch of travelers coming into market, and then all of a sudden we, inexplicable plops, and it was related to that. So to the extent that we can get global travelers into the market, and then, that starts feeding the local market as you move them in.
Cool. So I know, no one loves to talk about competition, but after 20 years, the OpenTable has seen its share of competitors on all fronts. You've seen them come, you've seen them go. Because lately the speed of technology seems to be picking up, there is obviously more competition. I don't think anyone would dispute that. But how does a legacy brand like OpenTable, which is a huge company, stay relevant and stay kind of nimble in a startup world, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I look at competition as really just an engine to drive our own teams faster. If I think about how we do compete, though, again, along the vectors of marketing, operations, and hospitality, I would say we've seen less competition in the marketing side of things, just for what I just answered on the international side. It's actually quite hard to get that demand generation flywheel spinning. On the operations and hospitality front, there are competitors out there. I think OpenTable had been historically slower to move into the cloud, but we are the largest cloud-based table management operator in the world by a pretty wide margin. And so we've continued to make pace and change. Again, and we put data in the restaurant's owner's pocket. So we want to make sure that we're in a position that by virtue of, the 27 million diners that are coming to OpenTable every month, that we're giving data and information that helps makes the restaurateur smarter at the end of the day. But, I love and welcome competition. And again, I think it enables us to move faster. But I think the nice thing about being the number one player in the industry is you get to focus on the customer and less the competitors. And usually the competitors are focused on who's number one.
Fair. Another thing that we talked about ahead of this was some of the changes that you've instituted at OpenTable internally in terms of hiring. And I would love if you could talk through that a little bit. And then part two of this question, which I'll ask now, is are there any ways that restaurant businesses can adopt sort of the ideas and ethos of what you're doing internally to their own hiring practices?
Yeah, and what Kristen's referring to is, I put a call out to the market to be 50-50 in gender equality. It was really important to me, especially being in Silicon Valley where there's so many challenges out there. And the most important thing was we stood in front of the organization and said, this is important. And the reason we said it's important is because not just that it's, the right thing to do from a Pollyanna-ish kind of like, oh, it's this moral, objective. It's actually better for business. I mean, the data is proven over and over and over again that companies that have a more diverse workforce with people that they feel like they can come into work and actually do their job where they feel like they belong, they perform better. So I look at it as more of a fiduciary obligation that we have. But yeah, we look from top to bottom on our entire recruiting platform. From the very top, we did things like, we looked at our job descriptions, and we did a thing called Textio, where we realized that most of our job descriptions were really driving and getting toward male applicants. This is really on the engineering side, male applicants versus female applicants. So we, gender neutral the job description, and then we anonymized our resumes so that we took out gender identifying and also person of color identifying information out of that next layer. And then we made sure that we had diverse slates and diverse panels. The data shows that if you have you can't have just one diverse candidate, because then they become the diversity candidate and their odds of hiring are zero. So you actually have to fill the pipeline up. And then the result, the first quarter that we did this, half of the engineers that we hired were female. And when I look at the restaurant industry, first of all, I want to honor the struggle that a lot, especially I see female restaurateurs and actually people of color who've gone through and have surmounted the challenge that has been in the restaurant industry. But I also look to them and say, it doesn't necessarily have to be this way. I look at restaurants sometimes and I go, God, this feels like Wall Street did in 1996. Like, we have a long way to go. But back to the business side of the equation, if you can get your organization to a place where the people are loving that they come to work, your turnover is going to be less, you're going to have fewer expenses, you're going to have better service, all of this is going to yield a better result for your business. And that's something that I'm excited about. We've done a few things, and we're continue to do more. And for me, it's personal. I have struggled in very male-dominated industries throughout my life, and I think I'm very excited when I see the change that is starting to happen, in particular in the restaurant industry.
Great. Yeah. Hiring in Silicon Valley is different than hiring at a small restaurant.
It is.
But I think so. But you do believe that there are practices that
Well, and I'm watching the smartest restaurateurs get it. They get it. They understand that if you invest in your people, you are going to have a better product. And at the end of the day, kind of partially quote Maya Angelou, it's not what you did or what you said. It's how you made them feel. And most restaurateurs I know, what they do is they say, like, my purpose for getting in the industry was to create joy in my space. And when you do that by having a group and people around you, something special can happen, and the guest feels it. The guest knows.
Okay. I'm going to take probably just one audience question, but we'll just start at the top. Do you plan to improve transparency with regard to letting restaurants see certain analytics, like, if, for example, which ads drive the most business?
And by ads, I assume assume they mean on our platform. I mean, I think the short answer to this is yes. I mean, I think we're continuing to add the amount of data that we put at the restaurant's fingertips. We know that data is everything. And I tell our sales team all the time, which I see a few people out in the audience, that, data is not just, a selling tactic here and there. It needs to be the foundational pillar of who and what we are. We have a lot of data. We need to arm our restaurants with that data so that they can make better decisions. And so, yes, we're going to continue to increase the amount of data that we show. And if you are a restaurant owner and you're in the audience, please reach out. Not everything has been productized or operationalized yet, but there's probably a lot of data that we could get to you. And so I would submit that you ask sometimes too as we get better at producing it for you.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more because I'm personally curious about this question. Would OpenTable be in a better position if it was independent from booking any plans to hive off the business? So as a restaurant editor, it was almost a hard pill to swallow to see a restaurant-focused hospitality company go under a bigger umbrella for me. So I'm curious your thoughts here.
I think solving the problem of travel and dining is one worth solving. I can't even say that we've solved it yet. We certainly have not. But I think that you're seeing a lot of different tie-ups across not just booking and OpenTable, but in other competitors and other competitive spaces. And I think it is something that we're all working toward. And I think we have the best shot as our organization to go do it.
Great. Krista, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to have you. Thank you, everyone.